When Series 12 of Doctor Who premiered on New Year's Day, I was shocked by how much Chibnall & Co seemed to have upped their game since Series 11. For myself and many fans, a low point in the revived series' history. If you've been following this channel for a while, you'll know that I was bitterly disappointed by Series 11, which felt like a wasted opportunity in every sense of the word. After 6 seasons and a movie-length 50th anniversary special under Stephen Moffat, the prospect of a fresh take on the show was something I was relishing, but Series 11 dropped the ball severely, offering us paper-thin villains, companions who suffered from weak and muddled character work, and a Doctor Who, whilst played by a brilliant actress, seemed inconsistent in her motivation and characterisation. If you'd like to hear some more extensive thoughts on Series 11, I'd recommend checking out this video, which expands greatly upon many of the points I just made. But suffice to say, I approached Series 12 with extreme trepidation, and even as a long-term Doctor Who fan, it was hard to imagine that Series 12 would be much of a leap in quality in terms of what we had seen before. And yet, for the most part, Series 12 was something of a return to form for the show, addressing many of the issues that I had had with the previous series and giving us actual stakes on a scale that we hadn't seen in a long time. There wasn't just the series arc to contend with either, as the companions each faced their own personal anxieties and we learnt more about them as people, and despite the odd mediocre episode here and there, which to be honest is par for the course in even the best series of Doctor Who, the series was genuinely shaping up to be a marked improvement on what we'd seen before. Until that is, the Timeless Children happened. I spent time discussing the Timeless Child in terms of the broader character implications for the Doctor in detail, and if you'd like to see our thoughts on the reveal's impact on the show itself, you can check them out in this video here. But the Timeless Child didn't just fundamentally change our understanding of who the Doctor is, but also change my overall impression of the series as a whole. The episode felt as if it squandered all that we'd been building towards, and episodes that I very much enjoyed on first watch, such as Spyfall, Fugitive of the Judoon, and Ascension of the Cybermen, feel as if they have been somewhat squandered. Like Game of Thrones before it, it really does feel like Doctor Who Series 12 fell at the last hurdle, and threw away a lot of the goodwill that it had managed to win back since the disappointing Series 11. With that in mind, I'd like to explore Series 12 in further detail, and look through both its highlights and its low points to argue why the series was ultimately a success, until it wasn't. So, where to begin? Well, it's probably best to start our discussion of Series 12 with the episode which started it all, Spyfall, a two-parter which, to my mind, remains the absolute highlight of the series. I think when we look at Spyfall, it actually provides the perfect blueprint by which to analyse all the positive points of Series 12, as it is perhaps, more so than any other episode in the series, indicative of the vast number of improvements which made the majority of this year's run such a joy. Originally announced as a two-part James Bond pastiche, Spyfall looked as if it was going to be a fairly standard outing for the Doc and the gang in the vein of something like Partners in Crime. Nothing particularly offensive, but not exactly the type of episode that's going to get you excited either. I mean, the title remains cringy at best and a bit of a misfire at worst. Like, what does Spyfall even mean? Obviously it's a play on Skyfall, I know that, but like, Skyfall is already about spies, so why do we need to put the word spy in it? It just doesn't work. Anyway, in short, I wasn't really looking forward to the episode. As the opening titles ran, I was bracing myself for a repeat of Series 11. But by the end of the episode, I was shocked. Not only was the story a cut above everything we'd seen in Series 11, something that isn't particularly difficult to achieve to be honest, it was actually really, really fun. Like, the kind of unabashed, silly, goofy and OTT fun that only Doctor Who can get away with.
Hey! Are you shooting at us? Yes, I've got that!
At the same time, I was really unsure as to whether the second part could do the opening justice, but if anything, Spyfall Part 2 actively improved upon the premiere, providing us with a tense, fast-paced story which eloquently converged a plurality of disparate ideas and characters into a satisfying whole. What I loved so much about the two-parter was how we got a classic Doctor Who misdirection. With the previews, you'd have thought you were in for a paper-thin affair, but what we actually got was a fun, bouncy, RTD-inspired genre parody which slowly morphed into a time-hopping adventure with just the right amount of Moffat-esque wibbly-wobbly timey-wiminess to tide it over. What's more, Spyfall packed in a lot of ideas and was immediately a sharp contrast to the plethora of seriously low-concept episodes from Series 11. Like, in 2018, we got a spaceship that, for budgetary reasons, was flown using an invisible controller, whereas in Spyfall, we had the Master, creepy new villains the Kasavin, multiple time periods, and even enough time for some much needed character moments, all without mentioning that absolutely jaw-dropping conclusion. With so much packed in, this story could have been an absolute mess, but Spyfall proves something that we've always known, that two-parters are an absolutely essential component in any good series of Doctor Who.
Or should I say spy master?
As I just said, Spyfall was definitely a story jammed full of ideas, and I think Chibnall's decision to turn it into a two-parter was absolutely paramount to its success. When I think of what Spyfall could have been like had it been a single episode, it makes me think of Series 11's It Takes You Away, an episode which tried to tell about 3 different stories in 50 minutes, and as a result was a disjointed mess. A story like It Takes You Away with the right amount of breathing room could have been a lot better, but was instead hampered by its runtime, meaning that all its beats felt like vignettes. But Spyfall was a story that gave us moments to breathe amongst all of its manic energy, something I'll come back to later in this video. But for now, I'd like to focus on one aspect of Spyfall that was unquestionably pivotal to its success. Of course, I'm talking about that insane cliffhanger. Honestly, Spyfall was easily one of the best cliffhangers we've seen in New Who for a long time, in part because it had such high stakes. The reveal that Sacha Dhawan's character O was the Master would have been jaw-dropping enough. And yes, I know this was rumoured ages ago before the episode aired, but I genuinely think Spyfall did a great job of making you think otherwise, and we shouldn't really be judging an episode's quality by leaks in the first place, so let's focus explicitly on how surprising it was in the context of the story. Anyway, as I was saying, the reveal that Sacha Dhawan's character O was the Master would have been jaw-dropping enough, but no, we also got a bomb exploding in the plane's cockpit, leaving the Doctor and the companions hurtling towards certain doom, which, again, would have been more than enough. But then we also got even more stakes as the Master zapped the Doctor away to another dimension and left the companions essentially helpless. It's almost as if Chibnall had read a guide on how to do a proper cliffhanger, and the first part genuinely left me excited for Doctor Who in a way I probably hadn't been since Series 10, which aired all the way back in 2017. This raising of the stakes wasn't confined to this episode, however, as Series 12 gave us moments that left us begging for more information across the series. I'll come back to this later, but seriously, we got the cliffhanger to Spyfall, the Doctor seeing Gallifrey burnt to the ground, the return of Captain Jack, if only for a cameo, the unexpected arrival of the Roof Doctor, and of course, the central mystery teased across the series, the Timeless Child. All of these moments genuinely kept us on edge as to how the series would progress, and until the finale, it really felt as if the series was going all out in trying to provide us with moments that would be talked about for the rest of the week. But the cliffhanger of Spyfall wasn't just for showing us, however, as it also spoke to perhaps the biggest improvement of Series 12, the development of the 13th Doctor. Now, if you watched my video on Series 11, you'd probably know that my biggest criticism of Series 11 was that by the end, it was very difficult to tell who this Doctor was. The stakes were exceptionally low for most of Series 11, and it often felt like Jodie Whittaker was able to walk into any situation and save the day without any sense of threat. What's more, her character felt contradictory in terms of its writing across the series, and it often felt as if the writing team were producing episodes with different incarnations of the character in mind, who Whittaker would just sort of cosplay. But Series 12 went some way to developing 13 to an extent that I now know who this character is. In a similar fashion to Matt Smith's 11th Doctor, 13 is a Doctor who uses whimsy as a means by which to mask a dark, hubristic veneer. But unlike Smith, Whittaker's Doctor is less a master manipulator, and more someone who firmly believes that whatever they're doing is the right course of action, whatever the fallout, and this is something I openly welcome. Arrogance, as much as kindness, is a key component of the Doctor's character, and Series 12 saw the Doctor's hubris back in a big way.
Because sometimes this team structure isn't flat. It's mountainous, with me at the summit, in the stratosphere, alone.
Time and time again, the Doctor was seemingly in control of a situation before suddenly having the rug pulled from under them and realising that they had miscalculated and placed everyone in grave danger. If you want the moment that first shows this pivot towards Whittaker's portrayal, look no further than this moment in Spyfall, where the 13th Doctor realises that they have drastically miscalculated and have put their companions in danger.
I can't do it! Get away!
Moments like this loomed large across the series. There was the scene in Orphan 55 where the 13th Doctor realised that there was nothing she could do.
You want me to tell you that Earth's gonna be okay? Because I can't.
The sequence in Can You Hear Me, in which the Doctor had realised that she'd freed an evil god.
I presume that's your doing, Doctor. Always interfering. I've watched you blunder into this.
And of course, there was the sequence in The Haunting of Villa Diodati, in which the Doctor messed up so badly that she was forced to ignore Jack's warning and give the lone Cyberman the Cyberium.
What does that mean for the future?
It means I've put it in the gravest danger.
In contrast to Series 11, it felt as if this Doctor never actually had all the answers and was just sort of blagging it and banking on her hubris to produce results. What's more, the Doctor's arrogance manifested itself in dark ways across the series, as she was seen to be repeatedly aloof and berate her companions in ways we haven't seen before.
So long I've lost count. I've had so many faces. How long have you been here? You don't know me. Not even a little bit. You want to sacrifice yourself for this? You want me to sacrifice you? You want to call it? Do it now. All of you.
Moments like this gave newfound complexity to the 13th Doctor's character. This was heavily aided by the fact that Whittaker was given much more to chew on by ways of a character arc, which saw her coming to terms with the destruction of Gallifrey at the hands of the Master, whilst also struggling to solve the mystery of the Timeless Child and the Roof Doctor. If there's anything which is symbolic of how much the team stepped up the 13th Doctor's characterisation this year, then look no further than the ending of Spyfall, which featured perhaps Whittaker's best performance of the entire series. In no words, Whittaker perfectly conveys the Doctor's utter devastation at the sight of her scorched home. When I think of the 13th Doctor, it will be difficult not to look back on this moment without thinking of the pained look in her eyes as she realises that Gallifrey is no more. What's more, her response to this isn't the kind of heroic, nothing can stop me now response that we would expect of certain incarnations of the Time Lord. Rather, the 13th Doctor responds to these harrowing images by bottling up her emotions and trying to bury them under a friendly, outgoing personality. But this reluctance to open up to those around her marks her character for the rest of the series and results in her appearing tetchy and distracted when Ryan, Graham and Jazz try to open up to her.
I get you out your mardy mood. My mood's fine.
That's you, Todd.
These kinds of interactions speak to perhaps the second biggest improvement of Series 12, a more rounded and developed TARDIS team. If there's one thing that almost everyone could agree on in Series 11, it was that the companions were some of the least developed in the show's history. Yes, Graham was a cut above Ryan and Yaz, but really this was down to Bradley Walsh's charisma rather than any kind of definitive character traits. Whilst Graham and Ryan had to battle with a lot of internal anxiety in Series 11, it ultimately didn't feel as if they changed as people across the series run. The arc surrounding the death of Grace and its impact on Ryan and Graham's frosty relationship often felt as if it was being pushed to the wayside as they went on more wacky adventures, and also meant that it felt as if there was very little for Yaz to do. But this year the decision to develop the Doctor further also worked in the companions' favour, as we got to see them react to the Doctor's distant behaviour, by beginning to question whether life in the TARDIS really was for them. The most obvious example of this was in Ryan's conversation with Yaz in Can You Hear Me?
It's just our lives. Going from one place to the next, ignoring home.
But the series also provided many subtler moments in which the character seemed suspicious of the Doctor, or, at least to some extent, wary of who she actually was.
Why don't you ever share anything with us?
I share stuff.
Not about yourself, though.
Yeah, you know everything about us.
What's more, we saw Graham, Ryan and Yaz develop actual agency, which was achieved in part by plot mechanics that meant that they were often separated from the Doctor. This was established from the get-go in Spyfall Part 2, during a fun sequence in which, whilst on the run as fugitives, the companions were successfully able to subdue Daniel Barton's men.
Guns down and on the floor. Don't make me do the old soft shoe shuffle.
And peppered across this series were moments for each companion to individually shine and use their initiative. Ryan was given a lot to do in Orphan 55 as he successfully managed to avoid a confrontation with the Dregs, whilst Yaz, easily the most underdeveloped character in Series 11, was given numerous opportunities to show herself to be independent, such as in Praxis, where she independently investigates the mysterious illness. Graham, the emotional centre of the fam, was also given more to do this year, often acting as a voice of reason who was effectively able to calm people in manic situations or lend his advice to people facing great personal challenges.
I wallow in being unreliable, like I'm punishing him.
I don't think he's the one you're punishing.
In Series 11, it often felt like these lot were just along for the ride, whereas in Series 12, it really did feel as if they had grown as people and were able to be heroes in their own right, whether or not they were accompanied by the Doctor. Like, can you really imagine something like this being executed by the TARDIS team in Series 11?
How about now?
It's also impossible to talk about Series 12 without giving a lot of praise to Sacha Dhawan's Master, which provided an incredible foe for the 13th Doctor, something that was sorely missed in Series 11.
Call me by my name.
Master.
Beg your pardon.
If you've been following this channel for a while, you'll know that we absolutely loved what Moffat did with Missy during the 12th Doctor's tenure. But in many ways, and I know this is controversial, I would have been disappointed if Dhawan's version of the character was literally just a direct continuation of Missy. Just like each incarnation of the Doctor should feel distinct from their predecessor, each Master should be given room to provide their own unique take on the character, and Dhawan's Master felt fresh and distinct. Coming across initially as manic, Dhawan's portrayal quickly developed into something of a sullen teenager, someone who was bitter and resentful towards the Doctor, and who was throwing his toys out of the pram as a result.
I tell you more. But why would I make it easy for you?
What's more, Dhawan brought something of a physicality to the role, not seen properly since Roger Delgado's interpretation. There were plenty of tense action scenes in which the Master was seen to be physically imposing, even frightening.
Hands on heads.
There's something really repugnant about how much more physical this version of the character felt. Just look at this sequence in which he makes the 13th Doctor bow down to him.
Neil.
or the way in which he grabs her during this tense confrontation.
What have you done?
It's a real testament to Dewan's performance that despite only appearing in 4 episodes across the series, and really, if you want to be nitpicky, the Master is only really present fully in 2 episodes.
Hello, this is my friend Graham.
Oh. Sorry, you're... Oh.
But Dewan felt as if he was a consistent presence, weighing heavily in the Doctor's mind as she struggled to cope with the destruction of Gallifrey. Truly the Master was the MVP of Series 12, and it'd be strange to think whether the series would have held up as well were it not for Dewan's incredible performance.
When does all this stop for you? The games? The betrayals?
Why would it stop? I mean, how else would I get your attention?
One of my other criticisms of Series 11 was the lack of good rogues gallery for the Doctor. I mean, our returning villain was f***ing Tim Shaw. But this year, alongside the Master, we got some genuinely fantastic villains and characters, such as Zelin, the Manic Birds from Praxis, and even an episode like Orphan 55, which personally I didn't like, had a great villain in the form of the Dregs. It was also great to see familiar faces like Jack and the Judoon pop up, if only to pay tribute to the series' past, and everything this year felt as if it was made with a lot more love and attention than the preceding year. Like, when you compare this to Series 11, which gave us things like the Pating, it felt like an absolute leap in quality. Of course, the Master wasn't the only returning villain to feature this year, and in many ways, Dewan's status as the show's MVP was very much nearly stolen by a unique take on another long-standing character. I'm of course talking about the Lone Cybermen, otherwise known as Ashed. First appearing in full in The Haunting of Villa Diodati, the Lone Cybermen was teased earlier in the series, appearing as an eerie warning from Captain Jack.
The Lone Cyberman. Don't give it what it wants.
Whilst this tease was predominantly a means by which to give Jack a cameo in the series, the setting up of this secondary mystery against the backdrop of the Timeless Child provided a great means by which to elevate the stakes and make us feel as if the Doctor was about to face an exciting new threat. By the time the Lone Cybermen, or Ashad as they were later known, arrived 3 episodes later, it had been made clear to us that this was a villain whose presence would pose a huge challenge for the Doctor. But in reality, if this foreshadowing had been the only weapon in the Lone Cyberman's arsenal, it would have been an intensely disappointing experience. But thankfully, when the character did appear halfway through The Haunting of Villa Diodati, we were treated to one of the best interpretations of the Cybermen in living memory. You may have previously seen our video on the love-hate relationship with the Cybermen, but if you haven't, and if you haven't to be fair, you should definitely check it out. Suffice to say, I've always felt like the Cybermen were slightly underserved when it came to how fantastic their core premise is. Often Cybermen have felt like generic sci-fi robots who played second fiddle to the Daleks, but the introduction of the Lone Cyberman, a willing convert to the cyber race who was only partially converted and still retained their emotions, introduced a much needed degree of body horror into the Cybermen's design. Just looking at Ashad's battered and scarred face, it was clear that this was a character who had been disfigured beyond all recognition and whose quest to upgrade themselves had rendered them utterly ruthless and insane. Straight away, we were given cues that this was not an ordinary Cyberman, as we saw Ashad spare a baby rather than convert or destroy it. And for a moment, I was certain that this episode would employ the well-worn trope of a villain looking inside themselves and changing their ways after reconciling with their humanity. But thankfully, these were red herrings, and in one of the best moments in the entire series, we saw Ashad invert this trope as he was confronted by Mary Shelley.
I did spare your son because he's a useless runt, sickly and weak.
What's more, the Lone Cyberman, like Dewan's Master, posed a legitimate threat to the Doctor, and in one of the series' best moments, actually managed to secure a victory over her as he managed to manipulate her into handing over the Cyberium. What better way to establish Ashad as a credible threat going into the series finale than to have him actually beat the Doctor? And as we moved into the first half of the finale, Ascension of the Cybermen, it was clear that Ashad was going to challenge the Doctor. One of my favourite moments of the whole series came in the first 10 minutes of this episode, as we saw the Doctor and Team TARDIS arrive to a war zone equipped with all the types of reliable defences that we have seen employed against the Cybermen in the past. Except, in this instance, Ashad just destroyed them with ease. Dealing with these traditional foils to the Cybermen showed us that Ashad was more powerful than versions of the Doctor's foe that we had seen in the past, and as the episode progressed and Yaz and Graham became trapped on a cyber carrier with Ashad closing in, it was clear that this episode was brimming with tension. Ashad proved a compelling and interesting foe, and as we watched as he mysteriously tortured dormant Cybermen, I was excited to see just exactly how the Doctor and her companions were going to defeat this seemingly unstoppable force. Except, that didn't come to pass. Instead, all of these interesting threads that I highlighted were squandered in an episode which placed greater importance on fan lore than action, exposition over character, and worst of all, disregarded all of the threads we'd set up to make way for more "oh my god, it's a plot twist" moments. Before I discuss my thoughts on The Timeless Child, I'd just like to say outright that I still don't think Series 12 was necessarily perfect. Like Series 11, Series 12 still had a problem with rushed endings, with episodes like Spyfall, Nikola Tesla's Night of Terror and Can You Hear Me sort of abruptly resolving themselves, with the Doctor seemingly pulling a solution out of nowhere. Likewise, as much as the characters were afforded more depth this series, Chibnall still struggles to strike a balance between character work and action, with character moments often involving the characters walking off to one side and putting the plot on hold so that they can have a little DMC before returning to the story. But these are minor issues in a series that otherwise had its eyes set on much loftier ambitions than the modest stakes of Series 11, and even the best series of Doctor Who have issues and tiny problems. None of this is to say that Series 12 was ever close to reaching the heights of, say, the best of Moffat and Russell T Davies, but it was, at the very least, good, and kept me engaged from week to week in a way that Series 11 failed to do. But alas, The Timeless Child dropped the ball so heavily that it actually makes a lot of the things I'd praised the series for somewhat redundant in retrospect. Firstly, let's talk about stakes. Almost every episode of this series contributed towards the overall plot and thematic arcs of the series in some way. For what seemed like the first time in ages, we had a series which all seemed to be converging towards a central point, adding layers of mystery along the way, which we were led to believe would be resolved in the time episode 10 had aired. But upon finishing the series, I really do question, what was the point of all this? Like, let's look at this methodically. One of the biggest mysteries of the series revolved around a previously unknown incarnation of our titular Time Lord. When Fugitive of the Judoon, the episode which introduced this thread, aired, speculation was rife to their origin. Perhaps this was some sort of parallel universe Doctor, an incarnation we'd missed a la the War Doctor, or perhaps a future incarnation who had lost their memory. But no, instead we find out Ruth is one of potentially hundreds of Doctors who existed before the first incarnation. This isn't something I necessarily have a problem with, in theory. Rather, what I have a problem with is that the Doctor learns this information and then within the space of 10 minutes decides that it doesn't really matter.
How many more of me are out there?
I don't have those answers. But say I did. Would they even help?
For a central mystery to be set up and teased across an entire series and then promptly thrown in the bin feels very cheap, and to my mind insults the commitment the audience has given to the plot arc. Even when the Silence Will Fall arc got absolutely ridiculous under Stephen Moffat, there was never any doubt that this was important to the characters. But here, Chibnall basically says, you know that thing we teased all series? Yeah, it doesn't really matter to be honest, so we should just go back to some more silly adventures next time you see us. Series 12 wants to set up all this game-changing stuff, but then it doesn't appear they have the commitment to stick to it for even 10 minutes. So why should we view anything that transpires as worth our time in retrospect? Likewise, Ashad, someone who, as I just said, is absolutely one of the best threats of the series, fades completely into the background in episode 10 until he is shrunk by the Master midway through. Remember when Jack told us all way back in episode 5 that the lone Cybermen must not be given into at all costs? Well, in retrospect, it seems a bit null and void. If all it took was for the Master to shrink him, then on rewatch, this mythologising seems a bit empty. And make no mistake, this isn't that classic trope of a character being rendered minuscule in the face of an even larger threat. Rather, Ashad's screen time is drastically down in episode 10, as we spend most of our time watching the Master and the Doctor pontificate over various lore points, so it's telegraphed to us throughout the episode that Ashad really isn't that important. Even the moment I praised so heavily earlier, the sequence at the end of Spyfall in which the Doctor sees Gallifrey burnt to the ground, feels hollow in retrospect. During the Doctor's final confrontation with the Master, we see the Doctor wrestle with the possibility of destroying Gallifrey, in a scene which is ripped straight from the parting of the ways.
Take up these life forms. All those bodies still in the vaults. Every organic cellular life form on this planet.
The Delta Wave must kill every living thing in its path.
Other than being utterly uninspired, like this is literally beat for beat the same, this internal conflict is proved to be null and void as the Doctor is interrupted by Co-Sharmas, who decides to blow up Gallifrey in the Doctor's place.
Doctor! Still feeling confident?
This whole sequence is framed as if the Doctor faces an impossible moral choice: destroy her home and the people she once called a race for the sake of the universe. But in actuality, it seems as if the Doctor's only concern was blowing herself up, as she literally just lets Co-Sharmas take his own life and escape in the TARDIS. In contrast to the utter despair we saw earlier, it appears as if the Doctor really couldn't give two shits about her home being destroyed, and so why on rewatch should we presume she ever actually cared? Moreover, given that the whole theme of this series appears to be about questioning the Doctor's morality and arrogance, it seems weird that she gets a get out of jail free card in terms of her decision making, and so doesn't ultimately have to face any consequences for her actions. All of that stuff I mentioned about her and the companions challenging each other ultimately amounts to nothing, as she simply whisks herself away from the situation so she can get on with more wacky adventures. I'm not saying, by the way, that I now think these episodes are bad per se. Fugitive of the Judoon and Spyfall are still fundamentally fun and entertaining stories, but it's more a case that a lot of my love for these episodes came from how exciting they seemed in the build-up to the Timeless Children. But an episode like Fugitive of the Judoon, which is so preoccupied with setting up various story threads, expanding upon the mystery of the Timeless Child, and introducing the character of the Roof Doctor, feels weird upon rewatch. Like, when I see all these jaw-dropping moments and know that I'm getting a finale which is going to throw them all in the bin, what's the point? Does the lone Cyberman really seem like such a universe-destroying threat, when I know in a few episodes' time that he'll literally be shrunk down by the Master and tossed aside both physically and in terms of his wider contribution to the plot? And is the instance in which Gallifrey is destroyed at the end of Spyfall really as impactful when I know that by the end of the series, the Doctor's just going to let it blow up? And this is really my biggest problem with Series 12, the fact that it seems to care so little for all of the things that it sets up in its excellent first 9 episodes, and instead decides to signal to its audience that nothing we've watched ultimately matters. If there is a thematic constant to Series 12, then perhaps it lies in the quote by the Master, which was used so heavily across the series' marketing. Perhaps more so than any moment this season, this quote can be used to define Series 12, but not in the way that the team intended. In writing a densely layered series arc with multiple beats which sets up a lot of plot points, it was always going to be hard for the series to deliver and satisfy everyone. But in using a finale as a means by which to say to the audience, this doesn't matter, it signals to us that the touted importance of everything we've been building up to was, in fact, a lie. As I said earlier, Series 12 was never going to reach the heights of something like Series 5, still the gold standard for Doctor Who as far as I'm concerned, but it definitely presented a marked improvement upon Series 11, and I really was optimistic coming into the show's final episode. But in offering us a conclusion which did away with pretty much every thematic beat we've been building up to, I can't help but feel as if the series has left something of a bad taste in my mouth. As lifelong fans, it's inevitable we'll be back for Series 13, but after an awful first season, and this season being an improvement only to miss the mark and devolve into Chibnall's worst tendencies, it's safe to say that being a fan of Doctor Who during this era is an exhausting experience. I really do want Series 13 to be good, believe me, but the Chibnall era still has a long way to go if it's going to reach the heights of the Davies and Moffat era again.
Thank you for watching another full fat video. Don't forget to click that subscribe button if you'd like to see more of our deep dives into reality TV. Also, huge thanks to all of our patrons, especially Dr. Chike, Jax Merrick and Mike Nandu. You're all amazing. Until next time, stay